You look great. You look exactly the same.
The class of '63, George Washington High School, Denver, Colorado. For this 20th class reunion, graduates and their families came from all parts of the country. As a class member, I had also returned for the event, but there would be more to this visit than renewing old friendships.
This is Jeff's camera. Jeff. Hello.
The reunion would be an unusual opportunity to study lifestyles in a particular group. As the class of '63 approaches its 40s, we will be more vulnerable to illness and injury. But the risk can be minimized by how we live.
We found out through the history of the past 20 years or so in cancer research and later on in heart disease research that there are some very clear behaviors that lead to those health problems.
Chuck Nelson of the Centers for Disease Control in Atlanta specializes in analyzing health data. And he says statistics show that by controlling smoking, drinking, and our weight, we can probably add years to our lives and make them better years. Has the class of '63 gotten the message? We found that 82% of the group engaged in regular exercise, but it wasn't enough to prevent some expanding waistlines. Pete Fowler was the quarterback of our football team, the Patriots.
Oh, I'm in a lot worse shape, but I'm not, you know, and as far as overall health, I'm probably as healthy as I was.
On the other hand, Dale Schluter, who had a career in professional basketball, has made a big effort to stay in shape.
A lot of stretching, a lot of running. Do play on we have a former Trailblazer basketball team, a bunch of guys that did play with the Portland Trailblazer team. We do play around the state for benefit games.
Out of a class of some 600, certainly all felt they would be around for their 20th reunion. But a handful had died, either from accident, suicide, or as a casualty in Vietnam. Of those who survived the war, there were memories that would linger forever.
It's kind of like everything was a daze. You see one guy 1 minute, you don't see him the next.
Even in a relatively successful, affluent group such as this, a certain amount of trauma is inevitable. One of the most common is divorce. Over 1/3 of those at the reunion had been through at least one failed marriage. Kay Maria had a tough time adjusting.
I just went crazy for a year. I went into counseling after the divorce for a year and a half, and being able to talk it out with someone helped a lot.
Most but not all had been spared major injury or illness. Anna Absalom was paralyzed in a devastating car accident 8 years ago.
I feel that I am a person in a situation where there's no choice. And I don't think I'm a coward. But you either decide to go on or you decide to end it, and I decide to go on.
As the class of '63 goes on, what are its prospects? To find out, we asked class members to fill out a 37-question health risk appraisal. We brought the questionnaires back here to the National Centers for Disease Control for evaluation. Answers to those 37 probing questions were tallied up, and after the computers had done their work, it looked like the class of '63 was in pretty good shape. More on the results and their implications in our next report. Jeff Levine, CNN reporting. Maybe it had been 20 years since the class of '63 had danced to this kind of music, but we haven't forgotten. Old photographs, old friends, a fond remembrance of things past. This is the stuff of reunions. Almost invisibly, the children who attended Denver's George Washington High School had become adults with families of their own. When I think of the class of '63, a quote from Thomas Mann comes to mind. "Time is not a thief," said Mann. "Time is an embezzler up late at night juggling the books." Hard to believe that 20 years have stolen by since our graduation. During this time of looking back, we took the opportunity to think about the future. How is the class of '63 and thousands of others like it around the country going to fare in the upcoming years? One way to find out is to do what researchers call a health risk appraisal. That is, pass out questionnaires that probe an individual's lifestyle. At the reunion dinner dance, we got 79 graduates to fill out the detailed form. The results were tallied on computers at the Centers for Disease Control in Atlanta. They don't provide a statistically accurate picture of the class as a whole, but the information is interesting in its own right. It's a look at how one group has chosen to take care of its health and perhaps an incentive for others to do the same. Chuck Nelson of the CDC helped us analyze the data. What are the prospects for this group returning for its 25th or 30th reunion?
I would suggest that their chances of coming back are at virtually 100%. Their lifestyle seems to be much better than the average. Their awareness of the importance of social contact and of certain kinds of health behaviors is very evident.
Let's look at some of the numbers. 60% of us wear seatbelts most of the time, much higher than average, and the best protection against a fatal car accident. 29% of the group smokes. That's also below the national norm and a good way to prevent cancer and heart disease. 20% are overweight, but 30% is typical of the general population. We also drink less than average and usually keep out of social situations that would make us victims of violent crime. We tend to be married, college educated, basically happy with our lot, aware of the need to protect our health, and not prone to suicide. But this is a self-selected population, people who felt good enough about themselves to show up for the reunion. Mike Radetsky, a longtime friend, has become a pediatrician in Denver. He sees his fellow classmates as having survived the crucible of the last 2 decades well.
Basically, I see people who played the game fairly straight. That is, they may have experimented at some point in their life, but now they've gone on and they've achieved the kind of acceptable worldly success that most people use as the mark of a successful individual in general.
Even in the big chill of the 80s, there is a sense of warmth for those among us who are struggling. One of the best and brightest is Anna Absalom, now confined to a wheelchair with a crippling spinal cord injury.
The wonderful thing was that everybody came up and hugged me, and I found myself having conversations with people, and they were always holding my hand or touching me. And I think sitting like this, you feel isolated. You feel shut off by chrome and wheels.
But this was not a weekend of isolation. It was a time of joy, togetherness, and optimism, and of hope that with our good health intact, we'll be back for our 25th reunion. Jeff Levine, CNN, Denver.
Yeah, right. It could have been really bad.
Certainly among those with whom I spoke, there was a positive sense about the future. Gary Koff is now an investment counselor in Washington, D.C.
There is a feeling of satisfaction. A number of people came up to me and had expressed at the superficial level. They thought that I looked better than I had at past times, and that was nice to hear from people I hadn't seen in some time. But more than that, there was a nice feeling of seeing people's lives pursued quite independently of my own, with positive outcomes.
Cynical, but optimistic.
Cynical why?
Because life does do its little tricks to you, and you've got to learn that it's going to do those little tricks to you, and you're going to have to cope with them.
I'm basically optimistic. I'm like a lot of people getting to the 40s. We're starting to look toward retirement a little bit, you know, and where we're going to live when we retire.
Cindy McClellan Pruitt is a marriage counselor from South Laguna, California. Like many women of her generation, she balances career and family.
I think personally I'll see some changes in what I want to do career-wise. And I'm not sure what that's going to be, so I'm looking forward to it with some interest, anxiety.
A couple of other non-medical notes about our reunion. It was a chance for spouses to learn a bit more about the members of the class of '63 whom they married. Judy Koff found the experience worthwhile.
He's talked for years about the close friendships that he had in his high school and about how wonderful the school itself was, the academic training that he had. I've met some of his really good friends, some of the Marshes at our wedding. And it was nice to get to know not only those people, but not even the old girlfriends, just the old guys who used to pal around with.
A final thought. When we graduated in 1963, Vietnam was just a name on a map. No one could envision the horror that would take place in Dallas 5 months after we got our diplomas. Racial strife would sweep America, and George Washington High School would not be spared. The social upheaval of the last 2 decades turned children into men and women. There is pride in that, and it was evident even in such whimsy as a varsity alumni basketball game. The varsity from the class of '63 has slowed down a couple of steps over the last 20 years, but they haven't lost their competitive drive. Retiring basketball coach Bill Weimer summed it up this way.
It's easy to recall these kids because along with being pretty doggone good athletes, they were stellar students, good academically, and have all followed and stepped into tremendously fine professions. They had character for sure.